Okay, good evening everyone. So we have been here for the current affairs classes, right? So we are going to discuss some of the important events with respect to environment that has happened in the last week, right? So there are 5 issues, okay, and there are combination of reports and some of the sustainability studies that we have observed, right? So this is all the accumulation of that current affairs, all right. So the first topic is with respect to India's invasive plant crisis. Okay, India's invasive plant. What do you understand by this? Invasive alien species. What? They are not naturally found. Not naturally found. Okay. Lack a natural I can't understand. Predator. Predator. Okay. Okay. Yes, you can say that. And that is one of the reasons why they are invasive in nature. Invasive meaning that the limiting factors to their growth is very less. Right? And that is the reason, since they will have low amount of limiting factors, or such kind of limiting factors are not the ones that are inhibiting the growth of these invasive plants, right? So they will also conquer the vegetation wherever they are put in, right? And this will result into invasion of the plants species that are there, okay? And this will have consequent effects. This will have drastic consequences of the ecosystem where they are introduced, okay. Now these are not introduced purposefully. They might be unintentional or intentional in nature. There can be some cases where one country wants to give away such kind of plants, and due to the imports these kind of plant species are also imported, right? We have that something called as Cartagena protocol, right? What it does is it tries to inhibit such kind of invasive alien species, right? Because once we introduce them into our ecosystems, then it would be having very adverse effects, all right. So the news is that invasive alien plants, they are spreading across 15,500 kilometers square annually. Okay, every year it is increasing by approximately 15,000 meters square per year. Okay, so that is a bad news. That is a bad news for our forests. That is a bad news for our vegetation. Okay, and the range of effects that it will have on human populations as well. We will study in the next slide. And it is causing losses worth 8.3 lakh crores in economic losses over the last 60 years, and threatening ecosystems, wildlife, agriculture, and rural livelihoods. Okay, economic losses. What is the budget of India? Of what proportion is 8.3 lakh crores? Do you know what is the budget of India? Approximately. Just take a wild guess. If these are the losses, then what are the expenditures? What are the budget? It is, you could say it is near about 50 lakh crores. Right? Out of that, 8 lakh crores is being lost because of these. That is why it points to a crisis. It is a crisis that is happening. Okay, and this has been covered by this, you can write in your mains answers also. Nature sustainability. This is a study that has conducted this research over the invasive plants and what are the losses with respect to the area that it is going to occupy and also the economic losses. All right. Then we should further understand what is invasive alien species, right? Invasive alien species, as I told you, alien means that it is something that is non-native. Non-native does not belong. It is an outsider. It is alien, right? It is a foreign substance that has been introduced into your vegetation, right? And it has huge amount of growth capacity with a downside on limiting factors, where your vegetation would be competing for limiting factors like sunlight, water, soil, nutrients. They will thrive. Okay. So non-native plants introduced intentionally or unintentionally that can outcompete the native species. Okay, that is why they pose a big problem with respect to economic, environmental or health impacts. Now these invasions, they are also accelerated by various kinds of changes. Suppose you go for land use change, right? So this would decrease the resiliency of the ecosystem that the plants are thriving in, right? And in those situations, these invasive alien species will consider themselves as an opportunity to thrive, right? So land use change, climate change, altered fire regimes, soil moisture changes, livestock grazing, and biodiversity loss. These are all the causes due to which they will find an opportunity to overcome all the others and outcompete them, right? So what are the key invaders in India? Key invasive species. This is something, Prosopis julifera. This is a previous year question. Okay, this is a previous year question. If you put it right, I think it was asked in 2019, 2018. One of the papers asked you this. They simply gave this name, Prosopis julifera, and they gave you options A, B, C, and D, and defined what do they do to the ecosystem. Okay, so the only person who knows that what it is, whether it is an invasive alien species, they will be able to only gather which option is correct, right? So it is important for us to understand at least not all the invasive alien species, but at least the ones that are in use, right? So one is Lantana camera. These are all your scientific names of the invasive alien species. Chromolena odorata and Prosopis julifera, right? These are the key invaders in your ecosystem. All right. Now, what is the amount of damage that they have done? They have spread across 2,66,954 meters square of total area, right? And they are also, we looked in the last slide that they are increasing by how much? 15K annually, every year, right? So it points to a very big crisis, both, or I would say at all the levels, whether we consider the social level, okay, it is considered as important. Why? Because a lot of minor forest produce is being utilized by the tribals, right? Minor forest produce, that is being threatened. So livelihood is being threatened. Economics, it will have a cost on economy also. We have learned that 8.3 lakh crore losses are there, right? And then even at the level of environment, because they are going to lead to an environment that is more homogenized in nature, okay, to increase the resiliency of ecosystem so that it does not drastically reduce to a level where there is no species richness, where there is no diversity in the animals or the plants. That will decrease the ecosystem's resiliency. What this invasive alien species will do, it will homogenize those ecosystems, and in effect, it will reduce the resiliency of the ecosystem. All right. These figures are important, like you can quote them, not the whole number, but at least 2.6 lakhs. This type of a figure you should know and attribute it to the nature sustainability study. Okay, apart from this, what are those zones which are particularly high risk in nature? This was also studied under this. One is the Shivalik Terai belt, Duar regions, Aravalis, Dandakarnya forests, right? And Nilgiris, right? You know about the biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots are there, right? Those are the ones which have species richness, right? Both with respect to the population as well as the different types of species that we have. Okay, and these are the areas that are overlapping in nature with those biodiversity hotspots, especially this Nilgiris, right? It is a Western Ghat biodiversity hotspot that is being threatened. due to these invasive plant species, right? Then apart from that, these are the areas. Then what are the open ecosystems like dry grasslands, savannas, shola grasslands? You would have read in geography about shola forests, right? Wet plains along the Ganga Brahmaputra are most vulnerable to rapid invasive plant expansion. Okay, Ganga Brahmaputra, everyone knows which part it is. So, if we draw the map of India, okay, somewhat India, right? So, these are the points where you will have evergreen forest, evergreen as well as semi-evergreen. And these are the spots, Andamans. These are the spots where you will find huge amount of biodiversity as well. Biodiversity richness exists here due to abundance of rainfall. There is not much of limiting factor here. Okay, so this kind of non-existence of limiting factors will lead to huge amount of vegetation. And even they are being threatened now. Okay, one of the reasons for these biodiversity hotspots is that they are being threatened by these invasive plant species, right? So these are the areas. Like whenever you draw it on the map, whenever you draw this map on your mains answers, you should draw this map, okay? Next, what are the ecological impact? Ecological impact, one is biodiversity erosion. That is, there is decline in the richness of biodiversity. Why? Because they are outcompeting the vegetation that is already there, and they are thriving in even limiting factors. They lead to what is called as ecosystem homogenization. That is reducing diversity and in effect reducing resiliency. Okay. Then herbivore displacement. What is this? When the native plants will decline, herbivores will lose their natural food sources. Okay. Once whatever plants, animals have been eating, okay, they have a preferred source of food. They would have certain kinds of plants that they would be eating, right? So the food chain, how does it occur? Herbivore would be eaten by a carnivore, and so on. The food chain will go on. Okay, so this sets into place a series of cascading effects. Okay, starting with the plants, the producers are being absent in the ecosystem. That is leading to the decrease in the herbivores that are present there. And because of this decrease, there would be carnivores decrease as well. That absence would also occur, right? And this would directly affect what? Our conservation efforts. Conservation efforts. We have various kinds of conservation efforts that we are doing. We have tiger reserves, we have Project Tiger, Project Elephant, Project Dolphin, all kinds of projects we have in the conservation efforts. So basically, it starts at something so minute, right? Even it would be lush green, but still it is the invasive alien species that is covering the ground. Then predator impact, this is the same thing that I have told you. They are displaced due to the shrinking prey availability, okay, disrupting entire food chains. All right, these are the ecological impacts. We have studied about the economic impacts. How much losses are there? 8.3 lakh crores. Then ecological impacts, right? Then this is the social impact. Social impact with respect to human as well as the livestock. Okay, so these are the figures, you should note them down. 144 million, these people are exposed. Okay, these are exposed to these invasive species. Okay, it is not just the species will be there and it will reduce the source of consumption of the plants or the crops, but it is also that they will cause respiratory diseases. Respiratory diseases. Why? Pollens, very good. Pollens. Okay, they have a huge content of pollens within them, and this will lead to various kinds of respiratory diseases like asthma. You will have bronchitis, right? There is another reason why they will increase the respiratory diseases. This is because of climate change, aggravated because of climate change. There would be drying, and consequently, there would be forest fires. And these will have huge amount of toxins within them as well, right? That would be released in the form of gas, in the form of pollutants, and therefore it will impact the people around it as well, right? Then you have 2.79 million livestock that is affected. Understand the importance of livestock. Due to economics, due to consequent land reforms that we have had, there has been fragmentation of land. Okay, continuous fragmentation of land is taking place, and therefore it has led to people having very less size of land. Okay, and these are particularly called the small and marginal farmers. Okay, some farmers are also such that they will depend on their livestock. Okay, they just depend on their livestock for their livelihood and income. Okay, and it is also facing losses. Why? Because the access to fodder and grazing areas, that is also lost, right? So it is not just harming them physically, health wise, it is also harming them economically, income wise, right? Then 2 lakh farmland is at risk. 2 lakh square kilometer of smallholder farmland are exposed to invasive species, right? This is also a figure that is important for us to see. Okay. Then the livestock challenges, as we were stating, that there is reduced fodder. Okay. Then rural livelihoods, access to fodder is gone. Fuel wood. Okay, again one of the important things. Most of the rural populations will derive fuel from this firewood only. Okay, they will get wood from the forest and they will burn it. Okay, that is one of the inefficient ways of consuming fuel. Okay, that is why we have, what is that scheme that we have for LPG? Yes, yes. And we also have this Pehel scheme, where we wanted the people who are getting subsidies with respect to the gases, they should give it up. Give them the subsidies so that the vulnerable sections can better utilize it, right? And one of the important sources of indoor pollution is this, right? Indoor pollution. Fuel wood and fertile land, this directly harms the communities, okay? Then health issues, we discussed this, respiratory problems, and then it will set them in the cycle of poverty, right? Something that they cannot come out of. All right. So what are the challenges in brief, like in summary form? One challenge is that there is no dedicated national mission or central authority. For most of the problems, environmental problems, we have some organization, some statutory body is there, right? For example, for pollution, what do we have? Central Pollution Control Board, right? And respective state pollution control boards, right? For environment, is there an act that we have? For environment, we have Environmental Protection Act 1986. For biodiversity, Biological Diversity Act. Okay. For animals, for wildlife, we have Wildlife Protection Act. But does such a mechanism exist for invasive plant species? Invasive alien plant species? No. Right? So there is no national mission that we have because it is not being identified at such a scale. Okay, only when these kind of studies come into fore, we understand that this is a problem that needs our attention. Okay, there's no central authority, no national mission. Then there is lack of unified national database or monitoring system. Okay, the solution to this is that we must have centralized GIS based database. That is, from the satellites itself, I must understand how much the coverage of that area is due to the invasive alien species, right? They will serve as early warning systems. Like in disaster management, you have early warning systems. So you should be aware how much population of invasive alien species are there in your ecosystem. Okay, how it will have the effect on the future. Then we quarantine and biosecurity systems. Okay, we had this protocol, Cartagena protocol, right? Wherein we try to prevent from the borders itself from these plants entering into our borders and destroying our ecosystems. Okay, so we want to have stronger quarantine, strengthen quarantine, screening, and border biosecurity. There should not be any lapse. Okay, there should be a thorough checking of whatever things we are trying to import. Okay, then limited scientific research on control methods. Okay, one of the if you see, one of the methods that people usually suggest is to burn the vegetation. Okay, what will burning of that do? It will destroy the biodiversity that is around it. All the plants and animals will be also affected, or they will migrate to some other place and they will not survive there. Okay, it was actually habitat degradation that will take place if you go for fire method. More so, it will also increase the respiratory diseases. It will increase the pollutants. It will increase the greenhouse gases. Okay, biomass burning, because if they get dry and if you burn them, there will be release of biomass, release of greenhouse gas pollutants. Okay, so the control methods are not very well researched at present. Okay, therefore, for research, what should we do? Increase the funding. Increase the funding to understand how the ecosystem works. Okay, like we have climate models, we should also have ecological modeling, right? Then there is expensive, labor-intensive manual removal. If we don't have such kind of, you would have heard about stubble burning, right? Why is it preferred? It is, no, yes. Okay, so we have happy seeder machines are there. Okay, harvesters are there. So they will pluck out all of those residues one by one. That is something, if the people are individually managing that, that would be something which is very expensive as well as time consuming, as well as it will destroy the next crop cycle. Right? So we have expensive labor intensive manual removal. If fire is not our method, our not go-to method, then manual removal is. Okay. So what can we do so that we can sustainably grow, sustainably develop, is promote community-led removal and sustainable utilization. Okay. The community themselves should be involved. Like we have the concept of joint forest management, wherein the local community is involved in the process, right? Then post-removal areas are not restored properly. Okay, it should be actively restored by the native grasses, by the ones which thrive in that kind of a temperature as well as precipitation, right? So these are the challenges and solutions. Okay, so basically this is the summary of it if you want to write down. One is establishing national mission. Second would be building monitoring systems through GIS and a nationwide database. Strengthening biosecurity at the borders. Okay, we must enhance the quarantine and import regulations. Then invest in research so that we have ecological modeling and we understand what are the effects that are going to be there if these invasive alien species are allowed to grow to unimaginable extent. Engage communities, that is the pillar of sustainable development. That is, the local communities must be involved in protecting their ecosystem because their lives also depends on it. All right. Okay. Next, the second issue Bus fire at Nahargarh Biological Park. Okay. Whenever national parks, biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, these kind of things come into the news, then it becomes very important for me to understand, because UPSC will be focusing on them. What all things I should be looking for? One, where it is located. Second, what is the kind of biodiversity that is there? Okay. And third, how it is affecting your sustainable method of development. Okay. You have heard something about the sustainable tourism. Okay. Sustainable tourism. It is something that is also the work of the local communities. They will also derive some income out of it, and it has to be sustainable in nature. Within this, we have ecotourism. Okay. Ecotourism is a sustainable concept. Why? Because socially the local people are involved. Environmentally, we are trying to conserve with respect to the revenue that is generated. It is fed into the conservation of environment. Okay. And third, economically, it is generating livelihoods. Right. So it is a sustainable concept. Now, when we went to have this, bus ecotourism in Nahargarh Biological Park, we faced that there was a bus fire. This bus fire will destroy the biodiversity. It will destroy the image. Okay, the social incomes would be affected, and that is why it is in the news, and it is important for us to understand. Questions would be based on this. Okay, where it is located, biodiversity and sustainable tourism, right? So a bus caught fire. It was a lion safari. Okay, lion safari. So they will ask you questions. What is the protection status of Asiatic lion? Okay, they have asked questions about Asiatic lion. They will ask you where they are found. You will say they are found in only Gir forest, Gir National Park. Okay, but they are also found here, and this park is located in Jaipur. Okay, and this points to important safety regulations that we should have with respect to ecotourism. We promoted this as a sustainable tourism, but if the bus catches fire, if some kind of vehicle mishaps take place, if people are not willing to go over there, then how will it turn into a sustainable concept, right? So this becomes important, and it raises concern over the safety standards, the vehicle maintenance, and the environmental protection in these zones. Okay. So let us understand what is the location, as well as what are some of the geographical areas which are important for us to know. It is 12 kilometers away from Jaipur, and it is in the Aravali range. Aravlis are important for us. Okay, why is it famous? Why Aravali ranges are famous, or where are they found? What are the states? Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, Delhi. Okay, Aravlis will become important for us. Okay, and geographically, what do you know them as? They are the oldest fold mountains or block mountains. How many say fold mountains? Rest, block, fold. It is fold mountains. Okay. And they will harbor huge amount of biodiversity within them, right? So what is the biodiversity? Just to have an understanding, 285 plus bird species are found there. So there is huge amount of diversity in the aves, that is birds. Okay, one of the examples is white-naped tit. One important thing that you should also take away from this news is Ramsagar Lake. Okay, lakes have been asked in the previous year questions. In prelims part also, they have been asking about what are artificial lakes, what are man-made lakes, okay, what are natural lakes, what are crater lakes. Okay, these kind of lakes are something that they will ask time and again. And whenever there is a question, for example, they asked about Jim Corbett National Park. They asked about what is the river that flows through that national park. Ramganga. Yes? So we should be aware of these geographical areas also. All right. Now the history part of it. We don't know, they might ask the history part of it also. Once it is in news, they can, exploit it in any direction. So it is located in the Aravalli range that we have done. 18th century Nahargarh Fort. What it is named after? It is named after the Nahargarh Fort that was built by Maharaja Savai Jai Singh II. All right. And it has of course, lion safaris are there, and there are diverse wildlife. Right. Flora, again, they will ask about the climate. Okay, they will name a national park, and then they will also ask you what all things. They can ask you about location, they can ask you about the climate, they can ask you about flora, fauna, these things, right? So the flora there, the climatic region, it is dry deciduous in nature. Dry deciduous. Okay. You could have guessed this also had you known the place. If you had known that this is in Rajasthan, then we can also guess the kind of vegetation that is there, right? Scrublands and grasslands that create diverse habitats for wildlife. Then fauna, Asiatic lions. What is the IUCN status of Asiatic lions? Asiatic lions, the pride of Gujarat. Asiatic lions have been asked in the PYQs also. You should try and remember the IUCN status of these. Okay, it is endangered. Okay, Royal Bengal tiger, Panthera tigris, it is also endangered. Then you will have crocodiles, sloth bears, Himalayan black bears, and wild boars. Okay. These Asiatic lions, Royal Bengal tiger, crocodile, sloth bears, all of these have been asked in PYQs. Right? So I must know the protection status. I must know where they are, thriving, where they are located. Okay. So here is the species that you should cover. One is Asiatic lions, and it is particularly important because it is outside Gujarat's Gir forest. That is where major population used to be there. And you would have heard about something very important, the disease within animals. With respect to lion, we had this something called as CDV. What is this? It is canine distemper virus. Okay, that had led to deaths and disease in a lot of lions of Gir forest. Royal Bengal tigers, national animal. Okay, crocodiles and bear species. Okay. Then about the location also, Aravalli range. So it is spread up to 800 kilometers. What are the states? Gujarat, Delhi, Rajasthan, Haryana. How many states? 3 states or 4 states. Okay. Because they will ask you this and they will confuse you. कि 4 states hai कि 3 states hai, right? And they have asked this question about Western Ghats. If you check the 2018 question paper, you will find this. Western Ghats runs through how many states? Right? So they will ask you this question also. What is the highest peak? It is Guru Shikhar. So every mountain range, every such kind of news that is there in the current affairs, I must understand where they are located and what is the highest peak also. Right? The range gives rise to important rivers. What are the important rivers there? Banas and Luni. Everyone would have heard of this, right? Banas River and Luni River. You should locate it on the map also, right? Which sustain the agriculture and communities across the region. Okay, rivers are a source of both agriculture. They will contribute to agriculture, irrigation methods, and they will also be a source of drinking water for a lot of people there, right? So this is also going to be affected. Natural barrier. It is a natural barrier against what? Against desertification. It stops that barrier. Okay, forms a crucial barrier to the western desert, protecting the fertile lands and moderating climate. Okay, when we talk about ecosystem, we move from the understanding, however it is not linear in nature, forest to grasslands to deserts, right? That is how the ecosystem degrades. Okay. Resource rich, it is also composed of huge amount of mineral deposits. All right, being the oldest chain of mountains. So this is about the location. Then this is something for your mains answers. Like what are the challenges, conservation and safety challenges associated with this kind of an event? One is the safety standard, that we are not understanding it properly, that it must be holistic in nature. It should cover all the aspects of society, environment as well as economics, right? There must be enhanced safety protocols. There should be inspections, regular vehicle inspection should be there, right? Emergency response systems. Okay, there is a saying in Hindi that we have. What is it? That कि आग लगने पे कुआं खोदना. ठीक है, we should not do that. That once there is fire, then we are going to dig the well, and then we are trying to extract water to put out the fire. That is not we should do. We should already have these kind of responses put into place, right? Next is vehicle maintenance, rigorous maintenance schedules and safety certifications. Certifications must be there, right? It must be mandatory for all vehicles. Then environmental protection. We must balance ecotourism with conservation through sustainable practices that protect both visitors as well as the fragile ecosystems of the Aravalli range. Right? That is how you will generate revenue. Otherwise, people will stop coming here. They will say the bus catches fire. I don't want to go there. Right? So these are some of the conservation and safety challenges. Okay, we move on to the next important news. This part is important with respect to your pollution and environmental degradation. Okay, pollution, when I'm talking about pollution, there are what kinds of pollution? Air pollution is there, water pollution is there, land degradation is there. Okay, then you can talk about noise pollution and everything. This is particularly about the water pollution. Okay, water pollution that is leading to contamination of water. Okay, there are some thresholds, some limits that must not be breached. Okay, when you have drinking water, there are some TDS, total dissolved solids in it, right? It gives you the particular taste and the amount of minerals that are dissolved within your water. There are certain limits to which, beyond which, if you have those limits breached, then that will cause contamination and they would not be acceptable limits for as safe drinking water. Okay, and that is what is happening in the Gangetic Brahmaputra plain. Okay, because the major source of drinking water is this, or the groundwater. They will extract groundwater, and when it is contaminated with pollutants like arsenic, then it will result into diseases. Okay, one of that disease is gallbladder cancer. Okay, this lies in the overlap of a lot of issues that is both related to your governance, understanding how public health is at risk. Governance, how do I understand whether such a disease is taking place between within the masses? The second thing is environmental degradation is also happening. Okay, so this is an overlap. This is something that we observe as a symptom of environmental degradation, and then it directs us to keep reforms in our governance systems, right? So it is saying invisible epidemic. It is India's invisible epidemic, gallbladder cancer. Okay. So one of the public health records, what they have come out with, that the India's Gangetic Belt, it comprises approximately 10% of global GBC burden. What is the population proportion of India with respect to the global population? 1/6. We, if we come out with the percentage form, 16 to 17%. Right? Out of the whole population which is affected with global gallbladder cancer, 10% of them is in India. Okay, and it is also important to understand that 70% of these patients are women. Okay, so this is not just a disease, it is also a gendered disease. Okay, it is affecting women more than the men. Only 30% are men, right? And which are the states that are being affected? Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Assam. And all of these are linked to river pollution, arsenic contamination, and also the governance part where we talk about weak cancer surveillance. That is, we are not searching for cancer cases that prominently, right? One thing that you should understand about gallbladder cancer, gallbladder, everyone understands what is the function of gallbladder? Stores what? Stores now bile that is produced by the liver. Okay, that is important for digestion. Okay, a lot of people will have gallbladder stones. If you have heard about it, gallbladder stones would be there, and there is no method to extract it. So they will remove the organ itself, right? So there is gallbladder cancer. So what happens in gallbladder cancer? The symptoms. The only reason that you go to a doctor is because you have symptoms. Some symptoms must be there. But in this case, in the early stages, there are no symptoms. So it is impossible to detect. It is very difficult to detect, okay, because the patient won't go to the hospital, it won't be detected, and therefore it will reach a stage which is irreversible in nature. Only in stage 3 or stage 4, the detection would be there. Stage 3 or stage 4. By that time, it's too late. Okay? And it has less than 10%, like 5 years survival, only less than 10% such cases. Okay, this is the bandwidth that is given for their life, right? So that is why we call it a silent killer. Silent killer, and therefore it amounts to more amount of urgent attention from the communities, both medical as well as public health communities, understanding how it is affecting us, understanding how pollution that is leading to water pollution, arsenic contamination, and this is leading to gallbladder cancer. And this is a public health issue as well as a huge amount of social issue because it is affecting a vulnerable section. Vulnerable section, women, right? So 70% women affected. This is a fact that you should write in your mains answers. Okay. Then what are the drivers, environmental drivers in the Gangetic belt that we have? It is first is arsenic contamination. It is when you extract the groundwater for drinking purposes, and it has beyond the acceptable limits for the arsenic composition. Okay, you don't need to remember exactly what are the limits, but at least you should remember who prescribes these limits. Who prescribes these limits? For example, for air pollution, we have this AQI. There is a threshold beyond which you should not be, breathing in that contaminated air, hazardous air, right? What is with respect to water pollution? Who defines these limits? It can be WHO first at the international stage. Within India, this is the one I'm asking. Within India, have you heard of BIS? Bureau of Indian Standards. They define the acceptable drinking water limits for contamination by such elements, right? Then industrial elements. Across the, if you find the banks of Ganga, you will find a lot of industries are located there. They will directly discharge the water, the effluents from their factories. Okay, that is why we have the distinction between point sources in the Gangetic Plain and non-point sources, because such a huge population resides on the banks of Ganga. Okay, in geography, in human geography, you would have learnt about how the population settle along a water body. Okay, because maximum things are extracted from the water, whether it is agriculture, whether it is with respect to drinking water, right? Whether it is with respect to their livestock. Then pesticide residues in agricultural chemicals, they are also entering into the food chain. So treatment cost, okay, there is huge amount of treatment cost. Have you heard of something called as out of pocket expenditure? Out of pocket expenditure, right? Especially when there is public health at risk, they would not go and consult a doctor who are sitting in the government hospitals. They will go for some private hospital or some renowned government hospitals, and there the waiting lines would be very much, right? They would not be able to get a chance to get themselves treated, right? So there is huge amount of out of pocket expenditure, and these expenditures would amount to 8 to 10 lakh per patient. Do you know the average annual income of people in India, of households? Average annual income. This is something that will be mentioned in your economic survey. Take a wild guess. How much is it for 1 year? 1 lakh. 1 lakh rupees. How will they afford this? 8 to 12 lakhs, right? So this means that it will either go into impoverishment, poverty cycles, treatment will discontinue, people will stop the treatment in the midway itself, they will say there is no hope, why should I spend money? I cannot buy insurance with 1 lakh, right? Then intergenerational poverty cycles, that is they realize, they come to the understanding that you are just one disaster or one medical emergency away from poverty, right? Then environmental governance, it is at this stage also that we are facing problems. Environmental governance, why were you not enforcing the water pollution standards? Okay, we have so many acts, we have Air Act, we have Water Act, and encompassing all of them we have Environmental Protection Act. Why these were not enforced? Industrial effluent norms allows to continue discharge into rivers. Okay, there is no remediation measures that are taking place. We have been talking about Namami Gange, but it is still to be put into order, right? Then health surveillance. Cancer registries cover less than 10% of India's population. Okay, it relies heavily on hospital-based reporting, leaving rural poor statistically invisible. Okay. There is no surveillance. Unless you have surveillance of diseases, that is when you will realize that it is a public health emergency, right? How many people are turning up into the hospitals? That is the only thing that is being measured. Okay, what about the population that is not even reporting to the hospitals and they are dying because of these causes, right? So there is weak surveillance. This also needs to be strengthened so that we can introduce reforms in the governance part itself, right? One more thing is that it is not a notifiable disease. Notifiable disease, that is, you don't have to report it. There is no notification that should happen when it affects the public health. No mandatory cluster reporting exists. When you do not have such kind of cluster reporting, you wouldn't understand it that it is a public health concern. So, and also there is, because of the detection of the symptoms at a very later stage, at stage 3 or stage 4, there is delayed detection of regional spikes, that so many people are getting affected. Okay, there is no targeted prevention strategy, and there is low political salience despite the high mortality rates. They are not paying heed to such kind of deaths, right? What are the reforms? Reforms that are needed from the perspective of governance or with respect to environmental bodies also. It is, first, make cancer a legally, like through the act, make it a legally notifiable disease. Second would be increase and integrate the health surveillance, especially with National Clean Ganga Mission. Okay, there must be a holistic approach that we must apply. Okay, it should not be in isolation that I will clean Ganga. I should also integrate what are the health issues that the people along the banks of Ganga are facing. Right? So such kind of surveillance must be integrated within this mission. Okay? Strengthen groundwater testing so that there is no weak enforcement. Right? Whenever a certain threshold is breached, I should be understanding that there must be testing done and the cleaning of waters must be done. Then low cost screening to district hospitals and women focused awareness campaigns. Okay, that they must be also notified that you might be suffering from such kind of things, and therefore you should prevent it at an earlier stage. Prevention is better than cure, right? So we must prevent it at an early stage only. Gender sensitive cancer policy, right? These are some of the essential reforms. Okay. So this is basically something that is the summary, okay, of whatever we have discussed. And one quote that you should definitely remember is, something that gets measured gets managed. Okay, so if you are trying to increase your study hours from 8 hours to 12 hours, Only if you measure that you are studying for 8 hours, that is only when you are going to increase it to 12 hours. So similarly, in this case, only when you know the numbers through surveillance procedures, that is when you will manage it. That is how we will be able to prevent such kind of public health disasters. All right. Okay. We are moving on to the next topic. It is Global Environmental Outlook 2025. Very, very important report. Very important report. You will find numerous facts in this. Okay, that can be quoted in your mains answers. Also, this is a very favorite area of UPSC for the prelims exam. Okay, they will ask you which report, and they will ask you to link it to the organization. Which organization brings out these reports? So for Global Environment Outlook, it is UNEP, okay, United Nations Environment Program, and this is the 7th edition of Global Environment Outlook, right? The 7th session has happened in Nairobi, and they have also pointed out what are the environmental challenges that are facing humanity. Okay, we will study all the facts. Some facts that you should write. Okay, they are pointing to a crisis. There's always been, debates about the climate change. Developed and the developing nations will debate who will pay the cost of increasing global greenhouse gas emissions, right? We were talking about 1.5 degrees Celsius by the turn of the century, 2 degrees Celsius. These were the temperatures that we want the limitation of global average temperature to be, right? This has already happened. Okay, 1.55 degrees Celsius increased. Okay, it is a record temperature rise 1.5% annually since 1990, reaching record highs in 2024. You know what was the temperature in Delhi in the peak summer in 2024? It was around 50 degrees Celsius. It reached up to 52 degrees Celsius also. Okay. And IMD will define a heat wave that whenever you have greater than 45 degrees Celsius, that is considered to be heat wave. That is going to reduce the human output. That is going to have effect on your biological diversity. Right? Then about biodiversity. How many species are at risk? 1 million species are at risk out of 8 million threatened with extinction. Okay, it is not just the IUCN status anymore. We are talking about extinction. Okay, maybe we'll have to go for their captive breeding. Right, those kind of processes would have to be taken so that they don't go extinct. 9 million annual deaths. Okay, pollution related deaths occur annually. This is worldwide. Right? What is the cost? $143 billion. Okay, $143 billion climate cost, and it is the cost for extreme weather events. Extreme weather events that you will have due to climate change. What kind of events? You will have heat waves, marine heat waves you will have shrinking cryosphere. Okay, shrinking cryosphere will be there. Wildfires, urban heat islands. All of these are the effects. And all of these have a cost, economic cost, and that is $143 billion according to the report. All right. Now the economic cost, economic case for action. Now this report also points out that it is better to invest in protection, in stopping all of this, rather than going forward with inaction, not taking any action on it. What is the cost of your inaction? Is it greater than returns on investment? How much, if you start taking actions, how much it would be? So air pollution, health damages, the ones that you learn about in the GDP growth. Okay, we count everything in GDP, even the hospital costs. If there is deteriorating air quality, there would be air pollution. This air pollution will increase the hospitalizations, and this would be counted in GDP. So basically GDP is not counting the development. not counting the health indicators. Okay, the negative externalities are removed. So 8.1 trillion in 2019, right? That is approximately 6.1% of global GDP. That is what we are losing with respect to public health. Then plastic waste toxic exposure. Okay, $1.5 trillion in annual health losses, right? Then these are another two facts that global GDP, when we consider 2100 and 2050, there would be fall of 4% and 20% by 2100. Okay. Compare it with the returns on investment. If you start taking actions, if you start funding, if you start, strategic investments, this could yield for your economy 20 trillion annually by 2070. 2070 is also a year, do you remember for what? For net zero, right? Then potential 100 trillion per year thereafter. Achieving net zero by 2050 requires what? 8 trillion annual investment until 2050. Every year you have to invest $8 trillion. Okay, and this is just a fraction of cost of inaction. The inaction is causing you so much amount of money, right? But the investments will actually improve the public health. So whether you are going for investments, it is to be noted from this report that we must take action now. All right, towards both kind of strategies, whether it is adaptation or mitigation. Okay, then tipping points. What are the cascading impacts of environmental degradation? One is the crossing of tipping points. Do you know what is tipping point? Yes, beyond which, because it is something irreversible. Irreversible damage has been done. Okay, particularly used in the context of climate change. That if you go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, then there is point of no return, right? So it is likely to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius by early 2030s and 2 degrees Celsius by 2040s, causing irreversible ecosystem collapse and mass displacement. Animal migrations. Okay, wildlife migration also takes place because of the increasing temperatures, right? Then there is loss of fertile land, 20 to 40% of global land degraded, and it will affect the people who are associated with soil for their livelihood, particularly the agrarian population. Right? Just a comparison that it is almost equivalent to Colombia or Ethiopia. Where is Ethiopia? Horn of Africa, right? Of fertile land lost annually. This will affect what? This will affect your food security. Do you know what is where do we find food security in? Which act? National Food Security Act of 2013, right? So basically we are also facing such kind of issues, and it will also challenge our goals within our legislation, that is National Food Security Act, and also under the goal of Sustainable Developmental Goals, that is zero hunger. Okay. Nutritional decline, that is the hidden hunger. Per person food availability could drop to 3.4% by 2050. Intensifying hunger, malnutrition and social unrest. Of course there will be social unrest, right? When there is fight for food, someone will get it, someone will not get it, they will fight for it. Economic collapse. Then there will be economic collapse, mass unemployment, poverty and systemic instability. These are the impacts of environmental degradation. The cause was simple, that you are emitting greenhouse gases into the air, but the effects are huge. Okay. Now this report also gives us the transformative actions to prevent such kind of collapse. Okay, it says basically the concept is to understand that you should go for holistic approach. Holistic approach must be adopted. That is, you should not view ecosystems, climate change in one single individual sense, right? We should have multi-dimensional concept of health. We should all be worrying about the health of people, planet, as well as nature. Okay? Then health with respect to physical, mental, as well as spiritual. Then about past, present and future. That is to prevent any kind of intergenerational inequity that we are going to face. Our future generations are going to face. Okay, one very interesting example. Do you know this SF6 sulfur hexafluoride? Okay, has a global warming potential of tens of thousands. Survives in the atmosphere as a lifetime of, you know what, 3200 years. That means one pulse emission today, and your future generations, leave aside future generations, your civilizations will pay for it. Right? So this is the disaster we are creating. And these are particularly synthetic gases. These are man-made, okay, that we are emitting. So we should be concerned about past, present and future. We should have an understanding of how the emissions have taken place historically and whether continuing on the same lines would yield what kind of environment for our future generations and civilizations to come. Right? So this has to be connected to the indigenous people. It is not with, only the top bottom approach won't work. The people at the bottom must be connected, must be held responsible and also held into this account. They must be included within this policy. Right? It is only through them that we can have this holistic approach. Right? So 5 transformative actions are, first would be economy and finance. Okay, straightening that out. Like we are transitioning to comprehensive wealth metrics. All kinds of externalities are also included within it. Okay, the negative externalities, like if you have hospitalizations, then that should also be included. You should also go for materials and waste. With respect to that, there must be regenerative models that should promote reuse and recycling. That is a circular model. We must have that. Okay, energy systems. Energy systems, very important keyword, that we must decarbonize the supply. Okay, stop such kind of emissions, because carbon, if there is huge amount of carbon dioxide emissions, then it is going to create global warming. We must shift to some things like you will have hydrogen as a fuel. How we can harness the energy within it, we can try to research on that. Then food systems, there must be sustainable diets. Sustainable diet that should give the necessary nutrients. Okay, nutrient should be the one that should be promoted. Agricultural efficiency must be there. Okay, because a lot of greenhouse gases are emitted from the agriculture part, agricultural soils. Okay, there is huge amount of cycles that is taking place, biogeochemical cycles, nitrogen. Okay, environment, accelerate ecosystem restoration and climate adaptations. Nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions is, for example, mangroves. Mangroves will prevent any kind of coastal erosion. Right? They are important source of livelihood also. Medicinal properties these plants will have. Right? So these 5 action points can be very well written in your way forward. Okay, and attributed to this report. So the choice is basically the choice that we were talking about earlier, the cost of inaction and the return on investment, right? With respect to India's strategic priorities, green GDP framework, inclusive wealth index. Okay, we are also talking about a natural capital that is at risk and that is also depreciating because of the losses. Okay, for example, one of the cases that we studied today was invasive alien species, not your Indian Administrative Services. It is invasive alien species, and that is leading to 8.3 lakh crore losses. Right? So we should have inclusive wealth index. That something should be included in your green GDP framework. Then circular economy mission. Wherever there is a possibility of reuse or recycling, then we should have that included. Plastic waste, okay, plastic waste can be done. Then e-waste that end up in landfills and are not reusable, and we go on extracting, we go on exploring all those minerals, that should stop. Subsidy reforms, stop subsidizing those things which are creating environmental hazards. All right. Phase out fossil fuel subsidies, redirect to renewable energy. Okay, electric mobility and organic farming. All right. Nature-based solutions, it should be built into the infrastructure. Mangroves restoration, wetland rejuvenation, and urban green spaces. Okay, this is a picture where you have vertical gardening. Okay, because of urbanization, I don't have land to have this kind of a vegetation, right? So they have vertical gardens to promote greenery, right? These are some of the solutions that we can have. And above you can find, these are wind energy, okay? This is your solar panel, this is your vertical gardening. Because the floor space index is so small, right? Urbanization is a problem. That is, I want to have so many people within this small space, and therefore you will have high-rise buildings, right? In tier 2 cities, you will find that there is all horizontal. Everyone will have a separate house. Everyone will be rich. In here, you will be urban poor, right? Okay. Moving on to the last part. Vulnerable species. This is Western tragopan. Okay. The pronunciation does not matter. You are going to face this question in your prelims or mains, or you are going to write the exam. Okay, saving the king of birds. It is known as the king of birds in Himachal Pradesh. Okay, it is a state bird of Himachal Pradesh also. Why it is in news? It is because the captive breeding program at Sarahan Pheasantry in Himachal Pradesh, it has successfully stabilized the population. We know about the concept of captive breeding. What is captive breeding? We follow conservation measures in two forms. One is in situ and one is ex situ. What kind of conservation is this? Ex situ, because we are taking it out of its native place, right? So this is particularly because we want to stabilize the population. Particularly ex situ is done. Why? Because we see that there is a threat to its habitat. There is habitat degradation, something that affects the endangered species a lot more. Alright. So there is this one hope that is given to the conservationists, that we are able to conserve these world's rarest pheasants. Alright. So some facts about this they can ask you. Alright. So one thing is what they are called locally. It is called Jujurana, that is king of birds, and it is world's rarest, one of the rarest pheasants, state bird of Himachal Pradesh. Okay, where is it found? Location, they will ask you. Location, flagship species of Western Himalayas, known for its striking plumage and ecological sensitivity. The kind of colors that it has. Okay, if you see it in the wildlife, you will be, you will feel surprised. What kind of a bird is this, right? So males and females, sometimes they will ask about the distinction between males and females of a species, right? For example, female elephants, male elephants. For example, female rhinoceros, male rhinoceros. What are the differences? Okay, most common difference is size. Okay, then there are external features also. What kind of horn they will have, what kind of body size they will have. These kind of distinctions. So you don't have to go in depth, but it is just written for your understanding. Okay, these are the parts that you should definitely know. What it is called, where it is a state bird of, where is it found, okay, and how does it look like. Now with respect to the conservation status, it is listed as vulnerable. Okay, vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. Okay, the key important thing that it faces is habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. Right? And what are its key strongholds? Where are they found the most? Great Himalaya National Park. Okay, Great Himalaya National Park, Limber, Kazirag in Jammu and Kashmir, and pockets in Uttarakhand and northern Pakistan. Right? Even in Pakistan they are found. So if they ask you a question that these are found in India only, then you have to be aware that no, they are found in Pakistan also, neighboring country. Alright, this is the conservation status, that how many individuals are there in the wild, that is in the habitat that they have been taken from. So 3,000 to 9,000, 9,500. These are present in the wild, and 40 plus were captive, were gone through the process of captive breeding. Right? And it has successfully produced these many individuals. Alright. Where do they reside? The altitude range is this much, 2,400 to 3,600 meters. We realize this because the key strongholds are at great altitudes. Okay. So, why it matters? This is the last part. Why it matters is first because it is indicator species. What is indicator species? Indicator species are like early warning systems in disaster management. It will tell you when the disaster is going to occur. Okay, any slight change in the ecosystem resiliency, it will show up on these species. They would be the first one to respond. Right? So they are vital indicator of high altitude forest health affecting the overall conditions of Himalayan ecosystems. It gives us an indication whether these ecosystems are resilient, whether they have strengthened or whether they have weakened. In cultural symbol, especially for the state of Himachal Pradesh, known as King of Birds, and conservation hope, because some conservation status like C2 conservation is something that we have promoted, and we have found that this can be done. This is something that is possible. Right? So that is why it becomes very important both in wildlife as well as in our exam. Okay. So this is all the issues covered. Okay. Thank you so much.